The desert lay in eerie stillness, as if the world itself were holding its breath. Dust and smoke hung in the air, thick and choking, twisting in the fading orange light of a dying sun. Explosions had ceased hours ago, leaving only the distant echoes of chaos reverberating across the barren landscape. The mission that had begun with precision and confidence had ended in confusion, fire, and blood. She lay motionless among the wreckage, her uniform torn and blackened with soot. Sand clung to her wounds, making each movement agonizing. Her hands, once steady on the trigger, trembled slightly as she tried to lift her rifle. The metal felt heavy, foreign, almost alien against her scarred fingers. Pain radiated from her shattered shoulder and twisted ankle, every nerve screaming, yet there was a stubborn pulse of determination deep in her chest that refused to be extinguished. Her team had scattered under the onslaught of enemy fire. Communications had failed, radios were dead, and the voices she had relied on were gone. Every man and woman she had trained with, who had fought beside her in countless operations, was either retreating or lost. Intelligence would later report her as killed in action. To the outside world, her story had ended here, in a cloud of dust and fire, beneath a sun that seemed indifferent to her suffering. But she was alive, barely. Her lungs ached with every breath, each inhale rasping like sandpaper in her chest. Blood trickled from a cut above her brow, stinging her eye and mixing with the dirt on her face. She blinked against the sun, scanning the horizon with one good eye, searching for movement, for danger, for hope. Every instinct screamed at her to stay hidden, to conserve energy, to survive. A Navy SEAL never truly dies, not when life clings stubbornly, refusing to surrender. The enemy would assume she was dead. Their mortar strikes had missed her by inches. Their patrols had passed without detecting her presence, and their intelligence already labeled her a casualty. That assumption was her lifeline, her advantage. Survival in this moment required patience, cunning, and the ability to remain invisible. She could not afford panic. Panic would be fatal. Every decision had to be calculated, every heartbeat measured. The desert could kill with a single misstep, and she was painfully aware of it. Her mind, though battered and bleeding from minor head trauma, worked with the precision of a soldier trained to survive against impossible odds. She recalled the training, every drill, every lesson drilled into her from her earliest days as a SEAL. How to treat wounds with minimal supplies. How to ration water and food. How to move silently through hostile terrain. Every muscle remembered its purpose, even when her body ached with exhaustion. She drew a shaky breath and rolled onto her side, pressing herself against the warmth of the sand, seeking cover from the merciless desert sun. Memories flashed in her mind, her family, her parents' smiling faces, the sibling who had always teased her, her teen laughing around a campfire on training missions far from danger. She clung to them like lifelines, reminders of what she was fighting for. Survival was not just instinct. It was purpose. She could not die here, not yet. Not when there were people who believed she was gone, people who depended on her returning. Hours passed, or maybe it was minutes. Time had lost all meaning. Her body ached, hunger gnawed at her stomach, and dehydration made her thoughts sluggish and disjointed. The desert seemed to shift, mocking her with its vast emptiness. Shadows stretched and twisted across the dunes, creating illusions of movement, of enemies stalking her. But she forced her focus inward, calculating her next move, planning for the long journey back to safety. She crawled, inch by painstaking inch, through the debris-strewn terrain, using what little cover she could find. Her senses were heightened to an almost supernatural degree. Every sound, every shift in the wind, every ripple in the sand became vital intelligence. She noted distant movements of enemy patrols, the faint glimmer of a supply cache in the distance, the pattern of shadows cast by the dying sun. Every detail mattered. One mistake could mean discovery, capture, or death. The silence itself became an enemy. It pressed down on her, heavy and suffocating, amplifying every heartbeat, every shallow breath. She learned to move with the rhythm of the desert, synchronizing with its emptiness, blending into its desolation. She whispered to herself, a mantra repeated silently, survive, survive, survive. It was not arrogance, it was necessity. She could not allow herself to be found, not yet. Her life depended on it. As night fell, the desert transformed. The oppressive heat gave way to a bitter cold that seeped into her bones. Stars glittered coldly overhead, distant and indifferent. Darkness was a cloak, shielding her from the enemy's eyes, but it also brought new dangers, predators, unseen terrain hazards, and the threat of her own weakening body. She wrapped herself in fragments of her torn uniform, pressing against the earth, listening, waiting, conserving strength. Each moment of stillness was an act of survival, every breath a small victory. Even in her isolation, her mind never wavered from her mission. She remembered the training that had shaped her, the countless scenarios rehearsed under stress, under fire, under fear. Escape, evasion, survival, it was all etched into her muscles, her mind, her very being. The enemy thought she was dead, and in that assumption lay her greatest power. She would use it. She would endure. She would survive. By the first light of dawn, she was on her feet, weak but steady, scanning the horizon. She moved like a shadow, every step calculated, avoiding high ground and open spaces. Her determination fueled her body, pain pushing aside for a greater purpose. The battlefield was quiet now, abandoned by the living and haunted by the memories of those who had fallen. And among the ghosts of destruction, she moved forward, a lone survivor, refusing to yield, refusing to die. Even as her muscles screamed in protest, even as thirst and hunger clawed at her, she knew something fundamental. This is not the end. Survival is never passive. It is a choice, a commitment, a relentless assertion of life over death. And she had chosen life. In the silence after the mission, in the emptiness of the desert, one truth remained clear. A Navy SEAL never truly dies. She was alive, and that alone was her first victory. Thousands of miles away from the scorched desert, the world received the news that would shake hearts and silence communities. Headlines blared her death. Navy SEAL killed in action overseas. The photo that accompanied it, her smiling, helmeted face seemed almost surreal against the harsh reality of war. Flags flew at half-mast. Newspapers told the story of her bravery, and a nation collectively paused to grieve. To the public, her name was etched among heroes, a life sacrificed for freedom. Her parents received the official notification in the early morning. The letter lay on the kitchen table, its crisp, impersonal words cutting sharper than any bullet. They read it again, hoping their eyes had misled them. But the words were clear. Their daughter was gone. Their hands trembled, their breaths caught, and tears came without permission, streaming down faces that only moments before had smiled at memories of family dinners, laughter, and the daughter who had always seemed invincible. The house felt emptier than it ever had. Every corner whispered reminders of her absence, the empty room, the neatly folded uniform that had been packed for deployment, the unopened letter she had sent from bases far away. Her mother clutched a photograph of her, tracing the lines of her face as if willing her back into existence. Her father sat in silence, jaw tight, heart breaking in a way that words could not reach. For the first time, they faced a void that could not be filled, a silence that could not be broken. Communities mourned as well. Schools held moments of silence. Fellow soldiers and friends shared memories of her courage and dedication. Vigils sprang up in parks and town squares, where strangers stood together, united in grief for a life taken too soon. People left flowers, candles, and small tokens of remembrance, honoring someone who had given everything, though most would never know the true depth of her sacrifice. Their tears mingled with respect, a bittersweet recognition of bravery in the face of death. Yet amid all this grief, one truth remained unknown. She was alive. Somewhere in the unforgiving terrain of a hostile desert, she fought for every breath, every heartbeat, every step toward survival. She had been wounded, battered, and forced to witness the chaos that had torn her team apart. The reports of her death were not mistakes. They were assumptions, the kind that could save a life in the hands of someone trained to exploit them. She remembered the moment she regained consciousness after the ambush. Pain had erupted through her body like wildfire, but the mind is a cunning ally in survival. She recalled each drill, each scenario, each lesson embedded deep in her muscle memory. Her hands, though weak, found makeshift tools to tend to bleeding wounds. Every movement, every choice, was governed by the singular goal: live. To surrender was impossible. To be captured was inconceivable. Survival demanded focus beyond fear, beyond pain, beyond despair. Back home, friends and loved ones struggled to make sense of her absence. They recounted every memory, every phone call, every joke shared before she left on deployment. Questions gnawed at them. Had she known the danger she would face? Could anything have been done to prevent this? Their grief was tangled with confusion, with disbelief. How could someone so strong, so fearless, be taken so abruptly from them? They could not imagine a world without her laugh, her courage, her presence. Meanwhile, she moved silently through the desert, unseen and unacknowledged. Each patrol passed by without noticing her. Each distant explosion reminded her of the danger still surrounding her. Hunger gnawed, thirst burned, and every step threatened collapse, yet her resolve remained unbroken. Her mind clung to the thought of home, to the family who believed she was gone. That belief, ironically, became her secret weapon, allowing her to act with stealth, with patience, with purpose. They mourned her, and that gave her cover to survive. The human heart is resilient, but it is also fragile. Her parents felt the strain acutely, grappling with the emptiness left by her absence. Sleep became elusive, meals tasteless, and conversation hollow. Even in shared grief, silence became the most common companion. They spoke little, cried more, and revisited every photo, every letter, every memory they had of her. Every small object, from a school medal to a childhood drawing, reminded them of what they had lost, or so they thought. Social media amplified the mourning. Posts and hashtags celebrated her bravery, shared heroic anecdotes, and expressed condolences. People she had never met felt connected to her story, moved by a narrative of courage and ultimate sacrifice. Every notification on her family's devices reminded them of her absence and the world's perception of her death. They were surrounded by love and sympathy, yet the comfort it offered was superficial. Nothing could fill the void. Nothing could answer the silent questions. Where was she? Was she suffering? Could she still be alive? At night, when the world slept, her mother stared at the ceiling, replaying memories like a film. She remembered the first time her daughter had run off to training, the way her eyes had shone with determination, and the countless stories she had told about her missions. The thought of never hearing those stories again, never witnessing that determination in person, felt like a wound that refused to heal. Her father paced the floor, fists clenched, refusing to sit still, refusing to succumb to helplessness. Grief demanded action, but action had been denied them. Meanwhile, the desert tested her every moment. She crawled through rubble, scavenged for water from cracked soil, and treated her wounds with ingenuity born of desperation. Pain and exhaustion were constant companions, yet the instinct to survive burned hotter than both. She recalled the mantra drilled into every SEAL: adapt, improvise, overcome. Each small victory, finding a water source, evading a patrol, bandaging a wound, was proof that she could live beyond what everyone assumed. She was a ghost to the world, invisible to those who mourned her, yet every heartbeat was proof of her resilience. The contrast between her harsh reality and the mourning back home was surreal. The world believed she was dead, yet she moved like a living shadow, unnoticed, unacknowledged. Her parents' grief became a silent motivator. Each night she survived, each step forward, she carried with her the hope, faint but unbreakable, that one day she would return. That hope fueled muscles, sharpened instincts, and strengthened resolve. They mourned her as lost, but she refused to accept that fate. Days stretched into nights, and nights into a blur of survival and endurance. Her body was pushed to the brink, but her mind refused surrender. Every wound, every scrape, every blistered foot was a reminder of her vulnerability and her strength. Pain was temporary. Life was not. With each moment, the world celebrated her death, while she quietly defied it. She was alive. She was moving. She was surviving. And she would not stop until she returned to the family that had mourned her, to the world that had assumed her gone, to the life she refused to leave behind. And so, as the sun rose over a world that believed she was dead, she pressed forward. Each grain of sand beneath her palms, each scrape of rock against her skin, each distant sound of enemy movement reminded her that survival was a choice, and she had chosen it again and again. In the silence after the mission, in the shadow of grief thousands of miles away, one truth persisted. She was alive. Her story had not ended, and the world would soon learn that a Navy SEAL never truly dies. Alone, wounded, and deep behind enemy lines, she faced a reality more brutal than any drill, mission, or simulation she had ever endured. The desert was unrelenting. Sunlight scorched her skin by day, frost-bitten winds gnawed at her bones by night, and sand crept into every cut, every wound, turning pain into a constant companion. Every step felt heavier than the last, muscles screaming with exhaustion, heart hammering like a war drum. Yet in every ounce of fatigue, a single, unshakable truth kept her moving. She would survive. The ambush had left her disoriented and injured. Shrapnel had torn through her shoulder, leaving jagged wounds that throbbed with every movement. Her ankle was twisted, making walking agonizing, crawling necessary. Each motion demanded precision. A wrong move could open her to discovery, to death. Despite the agony, her mind remained sharp, calculating her environment with the meticulous focus of a trained SEAL. Survival was no longer about heroics or bravery. It was about endurance, ingenuity, and ruthless pragmatism. Water was scarce. Her throat burned, lips cracked, and her tongue felt like dry parchment. Every step she took was measured, conserving strength while searching for even a few drops of liquid. She remembered lessons drilled into her during survival training. Always ration, always conserve, always improvise. She gathered condensation from rock surfaces, filtered sand and debris from puddles, and scavenged from the remains of abandoned encampments. Hunger gnawed relentlessly, but she swallowed it, focusing on the goal rather than the pain. The desert was alive with threats. Enemy patrols moved in predictable, yet dangerous patterns. She observed them from a distance, lying flat against the sand, blending with the shadows, every muscle tense. One wrong move, one stumble, one sound, and her survival could end instantly. She moved only when the patrol's backs were turned, using dunes, rocks, and debris as cover. Her breathing became shallow, controlled, almost imperceptible, as though each inhalation might give her away. Pain was constant. Her shoulder throbbed, her ankle protested, and her body screamed in protest with every movement. But she pushed through, drawing strength from memories, discipline, and sheer determination. She repeated her mantra silently. Adapt, improvise, overcome. Every movement was a calculated choice, every breath a battle between despair and determination. She refused to give the enemy the satisfaction of seeing her falter. Each step forward was a defiance, a testament to her resilience. At night, the desert shifted. Darkness was both a shield and a threat. Predators, both human and animal, prowled unseen. The cold stole warmth from her bones, forcing her to wrap herself in tattered remnants of her uniform, curling tightly to conserve heat. Sleep was dangerous, but exhaustion demanded it. She rested lightly, one eye open, one ear attuned to the faintest noise. Even in rest, her body was alert. Survival demanded vigilance, a constant negotiation between fatigue and awareness. She relied on training that had become instinct. Wounds were treated with minimal supplies, field medicine improvising where traditional care was impossible. Bandages were fashioned from scraps of uniform, disinfectants extracted from supplies, salvaged from wreckage. She monitored her own vitals, careful not to overexert, balancing urgency with preservation. Each small victory, finding water, dressing a wound, evading a patrol, reinforced her will to live. Each moment of triumph was a reminder that her story was not over. Hunger became more than physical. It gnawed at her spirit. She rationed scraps of food, sometimes going days without a proper meal, forcing herself to focus on survival rather than despair. The desert tested not only her body, but her mind. Fatigue blurred vision, dehydration clouded judgment, and pain threatened to overwhelm. Yet she pressed forward, relying on discipline, her training, and a stubborn refusal to succumb to the desert's cruelty. She became a shadow, a ghost in the enemy's midst. Patrols walked past her hiding spots, unaware of her presence. She observed, memorized, and planned. Knowledge was survival. She tracked enemy patterns, noting supply routes, rotation schedules, and weak points in their defenses. Every scrap of information might be the key to escape, the path to home. Her enemy assumed she was dead, a fatal misjudgment, and she used it to her advantage. Each step forward was calculated, deliberate, and executed with caution. Even amid suffering, her thoughts returned to home, to family and friends who mourned her as dead. That grief, though they did not know it, fueled her steps. Each day survived was a day closer to returning, a day closer to rewriting the story that had prematurely ended. Memories of laughter, dinners, and simple moments became her lifeline, a tether to a world that still believed she was lost. The thought of seeing her family again was the invisible fire that refused to let her give in. The desert tested patience and cunning. She moved primarily under cover of darkness, conserving energy and avoiding exposure. Every dune, every rock, every shadow became part of her strategy. She scavenged what she could abandon: supplies, wild vegetation, and any hint of water. Improvisation became instinct. Every decision was life or death. A single misstep could lead to capture, or worse. And yet, she refused to let fear dictate her actions. Each challenge became a measure of her resolve, a step toward survival. Her mind replayed every training scenario, every drill, every lesson about endurance under extreme conditions. Each became vital, applied in real time, under the unforgiving sun and night sky. Her body, though broken and bruised, responded. Muscle memory took over where conscious thought faltered. She moved with precision, despite pain, with foresight, despite exhaustion, and with relentless focus, despite the despair threatening to creep into her mind. Survival was not only a physical test, it was mental, emotional, and spiritual. Time blurred. Days became nights. Nights became blurred shadows of light and darkness. But each sunrise was proof she had endured. Each breath taken against the odds was a victory. Her wounds continued to ache, but she adapted, improvising bandages and using the terrain for support. She observed, analyzed, and reacted, never resting fully, always moving closer to safety. The desert had tried to claim her, but each step forward was a refusal to yield. By the end of the third week, her strength had waned, yet her resolve remained unbroken. She had survived ambush, injury, hunger, and exhaustion. She had evaded capture, manipulated the environment to her advantage, and outlasted the enemy's assumptions. Each small victory compounded into momentum. The desert had been merciless, but she had been relentless. Survival, against all odds, had become her reality. She was alive, a testament to training, willpower, and courage. Even in her weakest moments, she reminded herself, a Navy SEAL never truly dies. Every pain, every scar, every moment of suffering was proof of her survival. She would return home, and when she did, the world would learn that death had underestimated her. The mission had been brutal, but she had endured. She had survived against overwhelming odds. And in the shadows of the desert, under the cruel sun and biting cold, she moved forward, alive, unbroken, and unrelenting. The desert had become her ally and her enemy, a vast expanse of sand and stone that both concealed and threatened her existence. By now, the enemy believed she was dead. That misjudgment was her greatest advantage, and she exploited it with precision. She moved like a shadow, unseen, unheard, a ghost among the dunes, watching the movements of her pursuers while carefully conserving her own strength. Every patrol route, every routine, every minor lapse in enemy discipline was a potential opportunity. Her eyes, trained to detect the smallest anomaly, scanned constantly. Distant dust clouds, faint footprints, subtle shifts in the terrain, all became vital information. She memorized their movements, their numbers, their rotations, mapping the landscape like a chessboard. Every decision became strategic. Should she move now? Wait? Hide in the shadows? Or take a risk crossing an open plain? Survival demanded calculation, and she was determined not to falter. Her life depended on it. Nightfall brought both relief and danger. Darkness concealed her presence, yet it amplified unseen threats. She crawled across dunes, every step deliberate, feeling the sand beneath her palms, listening for the faintest sounds of patrols or distant vehicles. Her body ached from weeks of strain, but fatigue became another layer of camouflage. Movements were slow, calculated, deliberate. Every sound she made, every shadow she cast, had to be measured. She became invisible, not because she was unnoticed, but because she had learned to move as if the desert itself were her armor. The enemy searched for her relentlessly at first, but soon their confidence in her death made them careless. Patrols became routine, complacent, predictable. She observed from hidden vantage points, noting supply convoys, guard rotations, and weak points in perimeter defenses. Each piece of intelligence became a tool for survival. Knowledge was power, and she wielded it like a weapon. Every night, she left false trails, misleading anyone who might come looking. Her presence became a whisper in the desert, a phantom that could not be touched. Hunger and thirst were constant companions, gnawing at her resolve. She scavenged what she could, puddles of water from rare rain, scraps from abandoned camps, and edible vegetation she had learned to identify in survival training. Each bite, each drop was a victory. She had long since given up on comfort. Survival required discipline and endurance, not indulgence. Her body was pushed to the edge, yet her mind remained razor-sharp, analyzing, planning, and adapting to every challenge the desert threw at her. Pain was relentless. Her shoulder burned with infection, her ankle throbbed, and every muscle protested movement. Yet she moved forward, one calculated step at a time. Every obstacle was an opportunity, every threat a test. She relied on instinct honed through years of training, on muscle memory, on the lessons of survival she had drilled into herself endlessly. Improvisation became second nature. She made splints from broken wood, bandaged wounds with scraps of uniform, and filtered water through layers of sand and cloth. Each solution, no matter how crude, kept her alive. Time became both an ally and an enemy. Days and nights blurred together, the sun and moon cycling without regard for her suffering. Each sunrise was a reminder that she had survived another night, that she was still unseen, still alive. Her movements became more efficient, more ghost-like. She blended with her surroundings, moving with the rhythm of the desert. The enemy's assumption of her death allowed her to walk unnoticed among patrols, to observe, to learn, to survive. Isolation, however, weighed heavily. Her mind struggled against loneliness and the psychological toll of extreme survival. She whispered to herself, reciting training mantras, recalling memories of home and loved ones, imagining conversations she might have once she returned. These thoughts became more than motivation. They were a tether to life, a reminder of why she endured. She could not succumb to despair, for despair was a luxury only the dead could afford. She began to use deception as a weapon. Small signs of life-disturbed sand, footprints, discarded scraps, were carefully placed to mislead enemy patrols. False trails drew them away from her true location, ensuring her continued survival. The desert became her canvas, and she painted illusions that turned hunters into fools. They thought she was dead, but the truth was far more terrifying. She was alive, patient, and biding her time, a ghost watching them, invisible and untouchable. Every night brought new challenges. Cold winds cut through her tattered clothing, forcing her to huddle against dunes, conserving body heat. Predators roamed unseen, and even small mistakes could mean death. Yet she had learned to adapt. The desert was harsh, but it was predictable. By reading it carefully, she turned every obstacle into an advantage. She observed the environment, memorized patterns of wind and sand, learned where to find shade, where to find water, where the enemy would never look. Each step was a blend of instinct, intelligence, and willpower. Her body, though battered and weakened, became a testament to human endurance. Every scar, every blister, every minor infection was a mark of survival, a record of battles fought against nature, circumstance, and enemy alike. She moved with the quiet grace of someone who understood that life was precious, fleeting, and worth every sacrifice. Pain became fuel, fatigue became strategy, and invisibility became her shield. By the third week, her movements were fluid, her awareness heightened. She knew exactly where the enemy patrols moved, the schedule of their routines, and the weak points in their encampments. She had become more than a survivor. She had become a phantom, a legend in the making. Every night she traversed the desert with silent precision, gathering intelligence, evading detection, and reinforcing her position as untouchable. The desert whispered her name, though none knew she listened. She relied not only on training, but also on instinct, intuition, and experience. Each decision was measured. Move forward or stay hidden. Eat now or ration for later. Risk exposure or wait for darkness. Every choice mattered, and she never wavered. Her body was exhausted, yet her spirit was unbroken. The desert had tried to claim her, but she had learned its secrets, mastered its dangers, and used them to survive. She was alive, unseen, and unstoppable. By the fourth week, the desert had transformed her. She no longer saw herself as the injured soldier left behind. She was a ghost, a shadow, a presence that could not be found. The enemy's assumption of her death had become a weapon in her hands. She moved with purpose, with skill, and with unrelenting determination. Her mind was sharp, her instincts honed, her body enduring. Every patrol evaded, every obstacle overcome, every night survived reinforced one truth: she would live. Even as the world mourned her, she thrived in secrecy. Each day of survival strengthened her resolve, honed her abilities, and reminded her that death had underestimated her. The desert had become her proving ground, the enemy her unwitting ally, and her own will the instrument of survival. In the shadow of assumed death, she moved forward, unseen, untouchable, and alive. She was no longer just a soldier. She was a ghost, a legend, a testament to endurance, resilience, and the unyielding human spirit. Weeks of relentless endurance had brought her to the edge of survival. Every day had been a battle, against the desert, against hunger and thirst, against wounds that refused to heal. And yet, in the shadows of isolation, she had endured. She had become a ghost, invisible to the enemy, a living testament to human resilience. But even a ghost cannot survive forever. Hope came in the form of a quiet signal, a prearranged code transmitted from a covert U.S. rescue team deep within the region. The signal crackled softly in the small, battered radio she had salvaged from the wreckage. Her heart skipped. Rescue was near. Every muscle tensed with anticipation and exhaustion, adrenaline surging even as pain coursed through her body. She had trained for extractions, for operations that seemed impossible, yet nothing had prepared her for the raw, desperate hope of knowing that freedom and home was within reach. Survival was no longer only about enduring. It was about moving toward the possibility of life beyond the desert. The extraction site had been chosen with care, far from patrols, obscured by dunes and natural cover. She moved with silent precision, every step calculated, her body weak but her mind sharp. Even in her physical depletion, instinct and training guided her. She avoided open spaces, hugged the terrain, and melted into shadows. Each breath was careful, each movement deliberate, until the faint outline of her rescuers appeared under the pale moonlight. Figures in tactical gear, moving with purpose and familiarity, reached for her, yet never made a sound that could betray their presence. When the first hand reached her, gripping her shoulder gently but firmly, she froze, unsure if she dared believe. Exhaustion and disbelief wrestled with joy and relief. The touch confirmed reality. She was no longer alone. The team had eyes only for her, moving quickly to stabilize her, applying field dressings to her injuries, checking her vitals, whispering brief instructions. Communication was silent, efficient. Life or death precision guided every action. Rescue had come, yet the danger had not entirely passed. One misstep, one error, and the desert could still claim her. The journey to the extraction point was slow, painstaking, yet calculated for efficiency. Her weakened body protested with every step, yet she pressed on, fueled by a determination stronger than pain or fatigue. The team carried supplies and equipment, but they left her to move as much as she could, a testament to her endurance and skill. Night wrapped around them like a protective cloak, shielding them from distant patrols and eyes that might wish her harm. She had survived the desert alone. Now she would survive with the aid of those trained to extract the impossible. Finally, the helicopter appeared on the horizon, its blades slicing through the night air. A rush of wind, the scent of fuel, and the vibration beneath her feet reminded her she was still alive. She had imagined this moment countless times, during sleepless nights and hours of crawling, yet reality surpassed expectation. She climbed aboard with careful guidance, her body trembling from weakness, her mind still processing the fact that rescue had arrived. The world she had known, the life she had feared lost forever, was within reach once more. The flight was quiet. Only the hum of the engines and the soft murmur of the rescue team filled the cabin. Her body ached, her wounds burned, yet relief began to trickle in. She dared to look at her hands, battered and scarred, and she felt the weight of survival, each scar a story, each bruise a testament to endurance. The desert was behind her, but its lessons and its scars would remain forever etched into her being. She had endured what most would consider impossible, yet she had emerged alive, unbroken, and resolute. Landing on new soil was surreal. The world outside remained unaware of her presence, still mourning her as dead. She moved under the veil of secrecy, guided by those who knew the truth. Family and friends believed they had lost her forever. Public recognition would come later, if at all, but for now, the priority was recovery. Medical personnel awaited her, ready to treat wounds and monitor her fragile state. Even the simple act of walking, of breathing fresh air untainted by sand and smoke, was a victory. She was greeted by the subtle but profound care of the military medical team. Vitals were checked, injuries treated, hydration administered. They worked efficiently, recognizing her body's fragility and her spirit's resilience. Pain was managed, but not eliminated. Survival left its mark. She bore the physical evidence of her ordeal: cuts, bruises, dehydrated skin, and bandaged limbs. Yet beneath it all, the core of her being, determined, unyielding, alive, shone through. She had faced death in the desert and won, emerging as something more than human. A survivor, a warrior, a ghost returned. Meanwhile, back home, her parents remained oblivious to her presence. They continued to mourn, unaware that the daughter they had believed lost was already on her way back, unseen, silent, and alive. Every thought of her at home, every tear shed, every prayer offered, was tethered to a version of reality that no longer existed. She had crossed the impossible distance from death to life, yet her loved ones still grieved. The contrast between her survival and their mourning was stark, a bitter reminder of how fragile hope can be. Her return was not celebrated publicly. Secrecy remained paramount. Yet the relief among those who had facilitated her rescue was palpable. The mission had been high risk, but it had succeeded. She had been located, stabilized, and brought to safety without alerting enemy forces. The desert, which had tested every facet of her endurance, had finally relinquished its hold. She was alive, and that truth alone was a quiet triumph. The world might not yet know it, but her return had rewritten the narrative of death and survival. In the safe confines of the medical facility, she finally allowed herself a moment to breathe. Pain, exhaustion, and emotional release collided, and for a brief period, she closed her eyes, letting the weight of survival settle. Memories of the desert, the endless dunes, the harsh sun, the nights under a cold, indifferent sky flooded her mind. And yet, beneath the fatigue, hope emerged stronger than ever. She had endured, she had survived, and she was coming home, not just physically, but spiritually, ready to reclaim the life that had been assumed lost. Even in secrecy, even in darkness, her story had shifted. She was no longer merely a casualty reported as dead. She was alive, a testament to training, endurance, and unbreakable will. Each breath, each heartbeat, was a declaration of defiance against the assumptions of death. The rescue had not only saved her body, it had restored her narrative, ensuring that the world would one day know that a Navy SEAL had survived when all odds said otherwise. As she lay in the medical facility, wrapped in blankets, slowly regaining strength, a quiet resolve took hold. The mission in the desert had tested her limits, yet she had emerged unbroken. She would return to those who loved her, confront the grief that had surrounded her absence, and reclaim her life. The desert had tried to end her story, but it had only written the first chapters of a legend. She had survived. She was alive. And soon the world would know. Returning home should have been a moment of celebration. Instead, it felt surreal, almost wrong. She walked through familiar streets, breathing in the air she had longed for during endless nights in the desert, yet the world still believed she was dead. Family and friends mourned her absence, unaware that the very daughter they had grieved was now alive, walking among them. The secrecy imposed by her rescue operation created a paradox. She was home, yet invisible, a ghost in the life she once knew. Medical evaluations and debriefings consumed her days. Doctors checked her injuries meticulously. Her shoulder still threatened infection. Her ankle remained weak, her body depleted from weeks without proper nourishment. She healed physically, slowly regaining strength, yet the emotional wounds ran deeper. Family members believed she had died heroically, and public recognition had framed her story in tragedy. She could not tell them she was alive, not yet. Speaking out would risk her safety, the mission's secrecy, and even the fragile network that had kept her alive. Even daily routines became exercises in caution. She avoided public recognition, moving quietly, blending in wherever she could. Life felt like a careful dance, interacting without revealing, smiling without explaining, existing without acknowledgement. Friends asked questions she could not answer, and family mentioned moments she had missed. Every encounter was a reminder of the strange divide she now occupied alive, yet untouchable, visible in form, but hidden in reality. The world had celebrated her death, and she had to endure that narrative silently. Sleep brought its own challenges. Nightmares returned, the ambush, the desert, the enemy patrols. She relived the moments of extreme exhaustion, pain, and isolation with vivid clarity. Yet those same memories reminded her of her resilience. Every time she awoke, heart racing, body trembling, she reaffirmed the truth she had carried through the desert. She was alive. Her survival had been a triumph against impossible odds, yet she had to live in a world that did not know it. It was a strange existence, but one she accepted. Her training as a Navy SEAL guided her through the psychological toll of secrecy. Discipline became her shield, focus her weapon. She spent hours in solitude, running through drills, preparing for the next phase of her life. Physical training strengthened her body, while mental exercises fortified her mind. She visualized missions, reviewed tactics, and rehearsed every conceivable scenario. The same determination that had carried her across hostile deserts now carried her through the labyrinth of secrecy and isolation. Even unseen, she remained prepared, vigilant, and unbroken. Visits from the rescue team and military liaisons were cautious, brief, and professional. They ensured her well-being, provided updates on operational secrecy, and reminded her of the larger picture. Every detail reinforced the paradox. She was both a hero and a ghost, celebrated yet hidden, alive yet untouchable. These interactions reminded her of the delicate balance she now navigated, a balance between survival and reintegration, between personal desire and operational necessity. She learned patience in a way the desert alone had never taught her. Her family's grief continued, unbroken by her presence. They spoke of her as if she were gone forever, recounting stories, recalling her childhood laughter, and imagining a future she was now living. Each mention was bittersweet. She wanted to speak, to comfort, to laugh, but silence was mandated. The weight of secrecy pressed heavily on her. She had survived death, yet now she faced a different challenge, surviving the life everyone assumed she had lost. The emotional burden was almost as heavy as the physical toll of the desert. She observed the world cautiously, learning to adapt to normalcy she had been removed from. Television shows, local news, casual conversations, Everything seemed foreign after months of life-or-death survival. Yet her military training allowed her to compartmentalize, focusing on physical recovery, emotional resilience, and strategic patience. Every encounter, every observation, reinforced a simple truth: survival extended beyond the battlefield. Returning home required skill, discretion, and the same endurance she had relied upon in the desert. Even in isolation, her resolve grew. She recognized that being alive was only part of her mission. The next step: rebuilding her life, reclaiming her identity, reconnecting with loved ones without compromising secrecy, was just as crucial. She trained herself to be patient, observing, listening, and learning. The world believed she was dead, yet she was quietly planning for a day when her return could be revealed safely. Each careful step reinforced her resilience, a testament to the unyielding spirit that had carried her through hostile terrain and near death. She also began mentoring herself in ways previously unnecessary. Alone, she reflected on what survival had taught her: patience, adaptability, and emotional endurance. She wrote notes in a hidden journal, rehearsing the stories she would eventually share, carefully balancing truth with operational constraints. Her experiences were raw and instructive, filled with lessons that could only be learned through extreme survival. These reflections became a personal refuge, a reminder that even heroes have agency, influence, and the ability to shape the future. Days stretched into weeks. Slowly, she regained the physical strength to walk without assistance, to lift objects, to train with intensity. Her wounds healed, but her scars remained, silent witnesses to the ordeal she had endured. She moved through daily life with purpose, blending into the world she had returned to, yet always vigilant, always aware. Life felt strange, surreal, yet she had survived worse. She had faced death, isolation, and extreme adversity, and now she faced the quiet challenge of existing in a world that believed she had been lost. Yet even in secrecy, she found moments of triumph. A quiet smile at a familiar landmark, a whispered memory of home, a controlled breath in the early morning, all became victories. Each day she survived under the veil of invisibility reinforced the lesson that being alive is not only physical endurance, but also emotional mastery. She had returned from the brink, and while the world did not yet know, her spirit remained unbroken. She was alive, and that truth was hers alone to nurture until the right time to reveal it came. In those hidden moments, she planned. She thought about her family, friends, and colleagues. How would they react when they learned she had survived? How would the world respond to the story of a soldier who had cheated death against overwhelming odds? Questions remained unanswered, yet preparation gave her focus. Planning became her strategy, patience became her weapon, and endurance became her mantra. Even in obscurity, she was active, alive, and in control of the next chapter of her life. The paradox of her existence weighed heavily, but it also defined her strength. Alive yet unseen, celebrated yet mourned, she understood the delicate balance between survival and secrecy. Each day was a victory, each movement a triumph over despair and circumstance. She had faced the impossible and returned. Now, the challenge was to navigate life under the shadow of assumed death, to prepare for a world that had already moved on, and to maintain her unbreakable spirit in the face of invisibility. Through it all, one truth remained immutable: she had survived. The desert had tested her, the enemy had hunted her, and the world had assumed her dead, but she endured. Her training, resilience, and determination had carried her through the worst possible odds. Now, in quiet isolation, she honed the skills she would need to reintegrate, reconnect, and reclaim her life. She was no longer only a survivor. She was a hidden hero, a ghost in plain sight, and a living testament to the unyielding spirit of a Navy SEAL. The day finally came when secrecy could no longer hold her story in the shadows. Military officials, confident that her safety was no longer at risk and that operational protocols had been satisfied, prepared her for public reintegration. She was no longer the hidden survivor, the ghost in plain sight. She was ready to step back into a world that had mourned her as lost, that had celebrated her death, and that was now about to witness the miracle of her return. Her first moments in public were surreal. Cameras flashed, reporters whispered, and eyes, some familiar, some strangers, focused on her as if she were a legend come to life. She felt a rush of conflicting emotions: relief, pride, fear, and the weight of years spent invisible, fighting for every breath. She walked carefully, moving with the grace and discipline honed in the harshest environments, aware that every step carried symbolic weight. The world was watching a Navy SEAL who had survived when all odds said she would not. Family was first. Her parents, who had mourned her loss as if it were permanent, could hardly comprehend the reality before them. Tears streamed freely, disbelief and joy battling on their faces. She embraced them, feeling the warmth, the reality of touch, and the undeniable truth that she had returned. Their grief melted into relief, their sorrow replaced by gratitude and love. This reunion was more than emotional. It was a reclaiming of life that had been nearly stolen from them all. Her story quickly captured national attention. News outlets highlighted her survival, her courage, and the incredible odds she had overcome. The public was captivated. A Navy SEAL presumed dead, surviving weeks behind enemy lines, navigating hostile terrain, and returning home alive. Her narrative became more than a military story. It became a tale of human resilience, of willpower, and determination that transcended circumstance. People felt inspired, connected, and awed. She had emerged from the desert as a living legend. Even as attention mounted, she remained composed. Discipline and training had taught her the importance of focus, of maintaining control over her actions and emotions. She spoke carefully, choosing words that honored her team, the military, and those who had aided her survival. She shared details that inspired, but withheld information necessary to maintain operational security. Every public interaction was a delicate balance between revelation and protection. Her calm presence reinforced the respect she had earned both in the field and now in the hearts of the nation. She visited memorials, met fellow service members, and participated in ceremonies honoring those who had fallen. Each event reminded her that survival was not just about herself. It was about the legacy of the team she had been part of, the comrades she had lost, and the enduring spirit of service. She spoke with humility, acknowledging the sacrifice of others, while recognizing the improbable victory of her own survival. Her story became a bridge between grief and hope, demonstrating that even in the darkest moments, resilience and courage could prevail. Media coverage highlighted her as a role model, emphasizing the lessons of perseverance, tactical skill, and mental toughness. Her story inspired not only soldiers and veterans, but ordinary people facing their own struggles. She had survived the desert, endured extreme isolation, and returned stronger, demonstrating that human spirit could triumph over adversity. Her life had become a testament to endurance, and each public appearance reinforced the reality that a Navy SEAL never truly dies, not in spirit, not in determination, not in courage. Yet amid the public attention, private moments remained deeply personal. Late at night, she reflected on the desert, the ambush, and the weeks of survival that had transformed her. The scars on her body were physical reminders of what she had endured, while the memories in her mind told a story of relentless courage. She thought about her parents, the grief they had endured, and the lives touched by the false assumption of her death. In these moments, she realized that survival was not just personal, it was deeply communal, impacting every life intertwined with hers. Recognition grew. Awards, commendations, and honors followed, acknowledging both her bravery in combat and her extraordinary survival. Yet she remained humble, focusing on the mission, the team, and the principle that service comes before personal glory. She met with young recruits, sharing insights about resilience, preparation, and mental endurance. Her story was no longer only about survival. It had become a lesson in leadership, courage, and the unyielding power of the human will. She was alive, yes, but she was also a teacher, a guide, a living symbol of determination. Every step in public life reminded her of the desert. The relentless sun, the endless sand, the nights of cold and isolation, all had shaped her into someone stronger, sharper, and more disciplined. She had survived not by chance, but by preparation, adaptability, and sheer resolve. These lessons were not forgotten. They informed every action, every interaction, every decision she made. Her past had forged her into a warrior whose story transcended the battlefield, whose presence inspired awe and respect. Finally, she returned home privately, to the life she had once known yet, which had moved on in her absence. Streets, houses, and familiar landmarks were the same, but the emotional landscape had shifted. Friends and family celebrated quietly, embracing her presence, realizing the miracle of her survival. Each hug, each tear, each whispered acknowledgement reinforced the profound truth. She had returned from death. Her story was no longer one of loss. It was one of triumph, resilience, and the enduring power of courage. Her return also sparked reflection within herself. She had survived against impossible odds, emerged from the desert unbroken, and faced the world that had assumed her gone. Now, she had to reconcile the life she had endured in isolation with the life she had returned to. Every day, she reclaimed pieces of her identity, reconnecting with friends, revisiting familiar places, and embracing family in ways she had only imagined in the desert. The journey was not just physical, it was deeply emotional, a reclamation of the life that had been nearly stolen. Through it all, one truth remained unwavering. A Navy SEAL never truly dies. She had survived what others deemed impossible, returned from the brink, and now lived as proof of resilience, courage, and the indomitable human spirit. Her story had moved from survival to legend, inspiring countless others. She had faced death, deception, and isolation, and emerged stronger, wiser, and alive. The warrior had returned, and with her, hope, inspiration, and a living testament to endurance had returned as well. Her survival had already captivated the nation, but it was her life after the desert that truly cemented her legend. No longer a hidden hero, she embraced the role of symbol and mentor. Schools, military academies, and public forums welcomed her presence. She shared not just a story of endurance, but lessons of courage, discipline, and perseverance. Every word she spoke carried the weight of experience, and every pause was infused with the quiet authority of someone who had stared death in the face and returned. Families approached her, teary-eyed, sharing stories of loved ones who had drawn inspiration from her journey. Young recruits listened intently, imagining themselves in her boots, internalizing the message that survival was not a matter of luck, but of preparation, determination, and relentless willpower. She had become more than a soldier. She had become a living symbol of resilience, a guide to those learning to navigate adversity in both war and life. Yet her fame was tempered by humility. She refused to bask in glory, constantly reminding the public that her survival was made possible by training, teamwork, and the unwavering support of the men and women who risked everything for each other. Her story highlighted not only personal endurance, but collective sacrifice. Friends, comrades, and mentors all played a role in her survival, and she spoke their names with reverence, ensuring that recognition extended beyond herself. The scars of the desert remained visible, Physical reminders of injury and pain marked her body, but they were badges of honor rather than shame. Every scar told a story. The ambush, the nights spent crawling under dunes, the ingenuity required to evade detection, and the willpower to endure. These reminders of suffering became tools of inspiration. In interviews, she explained the lessons embedded in pain and endurance, that hardship can forge strength, and that survival is as much a mental victory as a physical one. She also dedicated herself to service beyond the battlefield. Charities, veterans programs, and initiatives supporting soldiers and their families became central to her life. She understood the isolation, the fear, and the sacrifice of service, and she worked tirelessly to provide mentorship, support, and advocacy. Each project she engaged with carried a piece of her own story, offering guidance to those navigating trauma, loss, and recovery. Her legend was not just built on survival, it was built on giving back, on making sure others did not face their struggles alone. The public, once captivated by headlines, grew to admire the depth of her character. She was a warrior, yes, but also a teacher, a mentor, and a leader. Young recruits and civilians alike saw in her a blueprint for resilience. Each speech, each engagement, each appearance became an opportunity to reinforce the truth she had lived, that human spirit can defy impossible odds, and that survival requires courage, adaptability, and relentless focus. Her life became a bridge between heroism and humanity. Family relationships healed, strengthened by the miracle of her return. Parents who had mourned, siblings who had longed, and friends who had feared the worst now embraced her presence with gratitude and awe. Yet she remained mindful of her journey, careful not to take for granted the second chance she had been given. Every hug, every shared memory, every quiet conversation reinforced the value of life, love, and the enduring bonds of family. Her survival was not just a personal victory, it was a gift to everyone who had feared her lost forever. Her story inspired military and civilian literature, documentaries, and motivational discussions. They thought she was dead, but they forgot a Navy SEAL never truly dies became more than a headline. It became a mantra for courage and endurance. People facing personal challenges, loss, illness, hardship, found in her story a source of hope. Her journey reminded the world that even when circumstances seem insurmountable, determination and willpower can prevail. She had transformed from survivor to symbol, and her legend continued to grow with every life she touched. Even years later, she remained active in promoting resilience and preparedness. She returned to training grounds, sharing techniques with new generations of Navy SEALs. She emphasized mental fortitude as much as physical strength, teaching recruits to adapt, improvise, and overcome adversity in every form. She carried the desert in her mind, translating every hardship endured into lessons for others. Her experience became a cornerstone of training, illustrating that survival was not only about skill, but about unwavering determination and clarity of purpose. Her legend was cemented not just by survival, but by her enduring humility, service, and commitment to helping others. She lived openly as a reminder that heroism is not about recognition or accolades, but about the choices made in moments of crisis. She had stared death in the face, cheated it, and returned not to bask in glory, but to serve, teach, and inspire. Her journey proved that even the impossible can be overcome, that the human spirit is indomitable, and that courage can leave an enduring legacy. The desert, the ambush, the nights of isolation, they became more than memories. They became lessons woven into her very being. Every action afterward reflected the strength forged in those brutal weeks. She moved through life with purpose, focused on survival, service, and inspiring resilience in others. Her story became a touchstone, reminding everyone that even when all seems lost, hope and determination can carve a path forward. She was alive, she was unbroken, and she was a living legend. In the end, her life became a testament to human endurance, courage, and spirit. The world had thought she was dead, but she had returned to prove that a Navy SEAL never truly dies. Her story transcended military heroism. It became universal. Families, soldiers, civilians, young and old, found inspiration in her survival, in her strength, and in her unwavering commitment to life. She had survived the desert, evaded death, and returned to a world that now celebrated not just her bravery, but the resilience inherent in every human being capable of enduring the impossible. Her legacy was secured not just in headlines or ceremonies, but in the countless lives touched by her story. She had become a symbol of hope, courage, and perseverance. And in every heart inspired, every young recruit trained, every life she helped transform, the truth endured. She had survived when all odds said otherwise, proving that courage, willpower, and resilience can defy death itself. The legend of the Navy SEAL who returned from the brink would live on forever, a reminder that true heroes never truly die. They endure, inspire, and leave a mark that time cannot erase.